Thank you so much for joining us too, who is the Director of Neurology and Neurosciences at the Clínica Universidad de Navarro. And I, again, apologize for mispronunciation. But Jose, we talked about you going first. If you would like to take the stage first, and we'll have four 10-minute talks, and then...
I see there are 9 minutes now.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
You can take an extra minute. We'll let you go. I'm sorry, I stole your minute.
For the introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here. I really thank the Bank Inter Innovation Forum for organizing this event. I have two hats normally. One is the scientist and the other is the entrepreneur. I will be using today the entrepreneur representing in brain neuroelectronics. And what I would like to do is to share with you the perspective that we have on the limitations of the current clinical neurotechnologies for medical applications and what are the challenges for novel materials. Just to give you an idea of who we are a Spanish company that was founded in 2020. We are growing very quickly. We are 50 people right now. And we are deep tech, med tech, and digital health. And what we do is we use novel material like graphene to decode brain signals and to apply them for medical solutions. The field where we are interested is in neural interfaces, medical solutions, and repairing or helping patients. And they are going to be invasive technologies. And the reason for that I will show later is that if you think of precision in some of the therapies that you need to deliver, or in some of the therapies you need to deliver, you need precision. Yeah? When we think of neural interfaces, you see there a plethora of applications where these devices are already in the clinic. We have devices for cortical monitoring during intraoperative brain surgeries. We have devices for therapy in the case of patients with Parkinson's or epilepsy. Even a limited number of patients that have implanted devices for artificial vision, blind patients, and cochlear devices for helping in hearing loss, right? So many of these devices are already in the clinic, and they are being used as neuroprosthetics, as for helping motor or sensory disabled patients, as been mentioned before. Neural interfaces are also very interesting for discovery of biomarkers. When we think of diseases, monitoring the disease, delivering or exploring novel therapies for these diseases, understanding the biomarker, monitoring the brain activity, the nervous activity is very relevant. And finally, even if I come from engineering, I'm fascinated by the way the brain works, and I think that these neural interfaces could be used to help us understanding better the brain. However, current neurotechnologies in the clinic they have severe draw limitations. No? They are perceived and they are highly invasive. Yeah? If you think of patients, the picture on the left one is for a patient for Parkinson. They have a device which is implanted deep in the subthalamic nucleus. You have a cable and then you have a pacemaker in the chest. They are perceived like a highly invasive, and we need to work on that. They are based on what we call legacy technology, devices, technologies, concepts that were developed in the 90s or earlier, and therefore there has a limitation on the outcome of the therapy. Yeah? And finally, and Jose was mentioning about the closed loop. In general, they don't think of, or they don't consider information, real-time information from the patient or from the environment. So they are not adapted to or personalized. No? If you think of what is used normally in the clinic, these are 3 examples or well-deployed clinical device. The one on your left, it's a deep brain stimulation lead for patients with Parkinson. You see the dimensions there, 4 electrodes and most 8 electrodes to interface with a population of neurons, as has been shown before. The one in the center represents cochlear electrodes for hearing loss, and this is probably the most advanced with 16 electrodes. And the one on the right is a device which is typically used in intraoperative brain mapping, 4 electrodes. Certainly this is not sufficient, or it is not going to provide sufficient precision spatial resolution that is needed to monitor these networks that we think that we need to monitor. And this is where novel materials are very relevant. I'm going to talk about just graphene, but there are many other for sure. Graphene is a carbon-based material that it is interesting because the electronic and mechanical properties allow us to miniaturize the devices that are going to be in contact with the nerve tissue. Yeah? In addition to that, we will be using semiconductor-based technology, and this is another area where neurotechnology needs to improve, integrating semiconductor-based technology with materials like graphene improves the outcomes of the therapies. We can think of flexible devices that are going to match the mechanical properties of the tissue. So these are important elements that we believe that is going to make graphene an enabler, yeah, in the field. Just give me an example. Let me give you an example of why high density is relevant. No? Has been mentioned before that we need to monitor networks, spatiotemporal patterns, and I have been showing before typical device that is used in the clinic with 4 contacts, each of them of the order 5 millimeters in diameter and separated by 1 centimeter. The capability to obtain high-resolution data or information from that device is very limited. Here I show one of the devices that you can build based on semiconductor technology, which is based on graphene, and you see that the dimensions go to very small area. This is relevant. I mean, high spatial resolution. It is very important if you think of monitoring complex networks or complex activity in the brain, right? This is just an example of or representation. What you can do on the right-hand side shows high-resolution recordings. On the left-hand side, you see low-resolution recording. And from our perspective, moving towards high-resolution recording, it is going to be key if we want to enable a full understanding of these networks that we need to monitor. This is just an example of a device with 256 channels recording at the very same time in both hemispheres of an animal, and it gives you the impression of how the richness of the topography, the spatial temporal patterns that you can obtain and that you need if you want to understand the brain and if you want to develop proper therapies. An example of why this is relevant is, for instance, in the area of speech, BCI for speech prostheses. Like most of our brain activity, but in the case of language, it's a very broadly distributed activity of the brain. And you need to cover a large area if you want to be able to decode that information, and you want to cover a large area, but also with a high number of sensors. So high resolution, it is very important. And we believe that the technology that we are developing based on graphene could enable this type of technology. And I just would like to finish by mentioning the challenges of clinically translating some of these devices. Yeah? Our interest in brain neuroelectronics is the clinical translation of these devices. However, there is a big challenge. Typically, applications of neural interfaces can be in the area of preclinical neuroscience and in the area of medical applications, and they have very different regulatory and very different adoption or acceptance barriers. No? In the case of this type of technology, the low-hanging fruit, it is the neuroscience. So we can develop tools for our colleagues doing neuroscience. However, if you want to have an impact on society, on the patient's lives, you need to go to the clinic. However, going to the clinic is very complex. This is the high-hanging fruit. You need to go through regulatory barriers. You need to go through clinical adoption and acceptance barriers. And this is an area where novel materials like graphene and novel technologies are having a limitation at the moment, and we are working very hard with regulators in order to resolve this type of issue. So I would like to leave it here, and I will be happy to answer any question later on. Thank you.
We'll take questions at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. So Javier, thank you.
Are you the next?